Hello to anybody out there. We'll be starting in just about 1 or 2 minutes, and this is the Writer's Corner. And as you can see from my little sign down there, my name is Drew Becker, and we'll be talking with our guest today, who's Dave Baldwin, and I will introduce him or let him introduce himself again in about a minute when we get started. So if you're there, just kind of hang on for a minute so that anybody that's about a minute or two late can get in for the whole thing. This broadcast is coming from just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina. There's a rich tradition of writers in the area, and well, historically and now in the area, there are quite a few writers. So it makes for a good batch of people to talk to on the Hangouts, and we get a lot of information. The last time we talked to an editor, and she had a lot to talk to us about. If perchance you didn't see that, you might want to go to my YouTube channel, because you can review that at a later time. All right, well, let's get started. Welcome to the Writer's Corner for October of 2014. It's October 14th. And today my guest is Dave Baldwin. I'm going to have him introduce himself in just a couple minutes, or just a minute. But our topic today is deciding on a topic based on your marketing strategy. And I think this is a critical area to talk about, because a number of you as writers are probably writing for social media. Even if you're not, you may be writing for your business. And in doing that, it's really important that you are writing about things that are aligned with what you are putting out on the web. So, with no more ado, I'm going to have Dave Baldwin introduce himself, if he would, and just tell us a little bit about himself as a writer and anything else that you'd like to add. Dave?
Thank you, Drew. It's a pleasure to be on the show once again. And as Drew said, my name is Dave Baldwin. I am a digital content specialist, and what I do for business is I help businesses differentiate themselves from their competition, online and offline, by producing proprietary, original, timely and relevant content on a regular schedule, and get into the regular habit of publishing content and overcome all of the logistical hurdles that tend to get in the way of making that happen. So I've been writing, I would say, since I was about 10 years old. I didn't start writing at the business until 2007. Originally I was a computer programmer and electronics technician, and when I moved to Raleigh, I decided that I considered 2007 the year of my first retirement from my old career, and decided to go in a new direction, and haven't looked back since. And it's been a bumpy ride, but it's a lot of fun. So that's my 30-second introduction.
Thanks, Dave. And I think based on your experience, you are a very good person to talk about writing towards one's marketing strategy. So let's start with kind of a general question, and I'm sure we'll delve deeper into some of the aspects of it. But how do you decide what to write about for yourself and for your clients?
Mm-hmm. Well, first thing I want to say about writing, particularly for business, is that coming up with ideas for things to write about is not hard at all. In fact, I think most people, the issue is having too many ideas for things to write about and no easy way to narrow that down. And so I always say the best way to approach that at the beginning is to think about profitability, and think about, okay, what are the things I could write about that are most likely to bring revenue in the door, or actually cut costs. And writing is not just about marketing. There's also another side to it, which is training team members and things along those lines, but I won't necessarily go into that right now. But I'm just making the general point to focus on profitability from a business standpoint as kind of an objective compass needle to look at each potential topic you might write about and say, does this fit inside the marketing strategy that I've identified for my company? Easier said than done, but I'll just give you a couple of things to look at inside of that. One is you may have heard of something called an avatar exercise, which is simply it's an exercise designed to help define a market, who your target market is. More specifically, named after the movie Avatar, where there was these science creatures, sci-fi creatures, where you jump into their skins and run around. And that's basically the idea when you do an avatar exercise, is that you want to write out a thorough, vivid description of who your customer is, so well that you could basically stand in their shoes and know what it's like to feel what they feel right now. And that's an important exercise, I think, whether you're a writer or not. Anybody who runs a business and needs to get customers, you have to understand how to empathize with your customer. But when you're doing content writing, it's even more important, just because it's easy to get into your own head and write about things that you think are interesting or exciting, but that fail to connect with your audience. And so that type of exercise is a really good place to start in terms of strategy. But you definitely have to have a definition of who your market is. Who are the people that have the ability to spend money on your products and services? Who are the people that have a compatible need for whatever it is that you're selling, and those kinds of things. The other piece you want to think about is what's the call to action? Now, obviously, for a business owner, you want somebody to come spend money, but you kind of have to break down the steps that somebody takes to come to, in the process of coming to make a purchase or considering making a purchase. For example, like somebody who's in the market for buying a new car, they might go visit several dealerships, and the process might be a month long, depending on how long they have to buy a car. But there's going to be a set of steps involved in that. And so you kind of have to think about, where is the prospective buyer in that buyer's journey, and what's that next step that they're going to need to take that would get them closer to making that purchase from you. So you kind of really have to do a lot of critical thinking about, really goes back to putting yourself in the buyer's shoes, particularly the buyer who's at the point of being ready to make a decision, and think about what is it going to take to influence that buyer. Like what content are you going to need to produce based on what mindsets that buyer is currently sitting in right now. And a couple of other things to consider in terms of the content marketing mix is that if you're going to write content for your business, that's not the only thing you're doing to market your business. So you also want to maybe I would recommend anybody have a marketing plan on paper, even a one-page marketing plan, but to just a sum total of what's all the marketing activity that you're doing. Because I think it's really important that the topics that you select to write about are aligned or at least coordinated with the other things that you're doing in your marketing, and to not have the right hand doing one thing and the left hand doing something else. I find that most marketing activity is much more effective when it all works together and it's coordinated. So that's kind of my initial thoughts on where do you begin in terms of creating a topic. Now, when I want to drill down further and we want to actually, let's say that we figured out that we're going to do a blog, or we're going to publish articles, or whatever else, and we just want to identify like a list of titles for articles or something like that. One easy way to start with that, and to just get a few down on paper and get started, is identify what are some common sales objections that you will run into during that sales process when you're talking to an ideal prospect. Or you could also look at what are some common myths or misconceptions about your product, your service, or your industry. I found that usually most businesses can come up with a good 5 or 10 topics right off the bat just by looking at those two areas. And I would just recommend, think about what's the most profitable sale that you're trying to make. What's your most profitable product and service line? And usually there might be 2 or 3. And then obviously for retailers that are selling a lot of lower ticket items, there might be more. But so there's a lot of different things. So there's a couple of things I just said that would be easy ways to get started, but identifying topics to write about is really an ongoing process that you kind of really have to do iteratively. There's no simple formula for it. It's simple in some ways, but doing it effectively is not always as simple. So I didn't go too far there.
Oh, before you go on, I wanted to go back and talk and ask you a little bit about avatars. Because you said you wanted to build kind of a profile for your avatar.
Yes.
What kind of information do you need to know about your avatar in order to be able to write for that person?
Okay. One point I want to make about the avatar to begin with is the way that I was always taught to do it is to pick one person, and think of your avatar not as a group of people, but as one specific individual human person. So if you think about like your target segment is, you know, people from 25 to 35 years old, let's say, for instance, you'd want to pick the name of one person and pick either a man or a woman. And if you find that you might need to do more than one, but for the purpose of doing an avatar exercise, you'd want to have it be either a man or a woman, and let's say it's age 28 or so. But you basically want to write it out like a character in a book, where it's a real person. So you want to know age, demographics, income. Do they have children? How many children? I've even heard it recommended sometimes you want to write out the names of the children, what grades they're in, and all this like really specific levels of detail. What city do they live in? What things do they think about? What keeps that person up at night? What products or solutions have they tried before coming to the situation that they're in right now? That's a pretty good place to start, I would say, if you look at those type of characteristics. The main goal of an avatar exercise is to really understand the mindset of the audience as thoroughly as possible. So you might find it helpful to flesh that out more if it's helpful, and just kind of use your imagination, brainstorm some other things like you know, you might want to factor in career, marital status. You know, is it a business owner? Is it an employee at a corporation? Is it somebody that, perhaps if it's a single person without kids, is it somebody who's planning to have kids or somebody who doesn't want to have kids? Is this somebody who lives in a large house, somebody who values stability, who you know, has a more traditional type of a lifestyle? Or is this somebody who's more adventurous and who would be up for packing their bags and moving to a different city tomorrow if the opportunity presented itself? So those kinds of things is what you want to do to just get inside the mind of your customer. And you know, that kind of just helps you to frame all your content.
Now, I had a discussion today actually with one of my clients, because he's targeting 20 to 30-year-olds, which are millennials, and one of the people that works for him who's going to lead this new direction for his company is a 20 to 30-year-old. And so when I started to ask him, you know, who are you looking at? And he told me, and I said, well, you need to ask some questions of somebody that's that age. And I turned to her and I said, okay, tell me this. What do you respond to? What do you read? How are you influenced? What kind of platforms do you look at on the web? So one of the things I think that we overlook when we're trying to create an avatar, we're trying to do it in our heads, but we probably have the resources around us with somebody that's close to us, or a number of people that are close to us, that can really help us put it together.
Yes. No, that's an excellent point, Drew, because I think, when you've identified your avatar and you've got your theory that came out of your head about what you think the market's going to respond to, yeah, absolutely, you want to run that by, if not a focus group, at least one person who's a close match to that profile, and get a reality check of, do they respond to your message the way you think they will? And yeah, if not, the sooner you find that out, the better.
Okay, great. Well, now this kind of really leads into the whole idea of strategy. You've mentioned that word a couple times. Can you tell me a little bit about what you mean by marketing strategy? And I want to just say one thing in the meantime. This Hangout is being presented by EasyWriter Pro, and one of the things that we've added to EasyWriter Pro recently is a template to do a net marketing plan. So I suggest to people that you find a template out there to fill in your marketing plan. But one of the things that you need to know in the marketing plan is strategy. So can you talk a little bit about strategy before we go any further?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, the first thing I should probably do is differentiate a strategy from a tactic. And a tactic really is just any given thing that you do in your marketing efforts. So let's say, for example, holding an event for your company where you invite your past customers for an appreciation lunch. That might be a good tactic. Posting on social media might be a tactic. The strategy, the way I define it now, and I'll tell you, the dictionary does not do a good job defining the word strategy. They'll almost kind of give a circular definition of, a strategy is a strategic approach or something like that. So the way I define it, there's a couple of different ways you can look at it. One is, it's the reason why you choose to do one thing versus doing something else. And I also would kind of maybe add to that that it's a methodology behind making decisions about how to allocate resources. Because the thing is, it's like there's all these good marketing ideas, but you have to. We only have so many hours in the day, and only so many marketing dollars you can spend. So you have to have a way to narrow it down. So the strategy, the way the role that strategy plays is it's that narrowing down. It's that filtering mechanism that helps to take 100 potentially good ideas and narrow that down to 2 or 3 that are practical, that you can execute, that you can measure, that are likely to lead to the results that you want. So that's how I would define strategy.
Okay. Okay. So once the strategy becomes clear, and obviously that's a process in itself, just like it is to create the avatar, but to narrow that down and figure out exactly what you're doing. I think that your strategy really has a lot to do with personal brand too. How are you going to put yourself out there on the web? And I think that's a lot of times that can be a function of strategy. But once you have your strategy out there, how do you begin to write to it?
Well, I should kind of go back to what I said in the beginning, is that developing a strategy, just like identifying topics, is really an iterative process. I would love to say that there comes a point in time when the strategy becomes perfectly clear and there's nothing else to think about. I've never experienced that to be the case myself. I think it just has a tendency to become clearer over time, and then sometimes conditions may change and then it's not as clear as it was before. But so I'm sorry, can you repeat your question one more time?
Yeah, that's a good point that you made, and I think it's important to go forward with the question. What I was wondering about is, once you have that strategy established, as well as you can get it established, how do you begin to find things to, again, find topics and find an approach and find a style that's going to fit that particular strategy?
Well, there's the answer to that question could get somewhat long-winded, but I'll narrow it down somewhat. I mean, I think it comes back to identifying all of the different things that you're doing in your marketing. Lay out all of your tactics on a sheet of paper and look at what you're doing to influence your market. And even before that, perhaps, is look at what's the change in thinking that you need to produce in your audience. So let's say, for example, if we have done an avatar exercise, you've identified who that audience is, you've identified what stage of the buying cycle you need to reach people at, and you've identified maybe that there's a particular myth or a misconception that seems prevalent among that particular audience. You might say, okay, well, given that that's the case, how do we shift that? How do we interrupt that thinking? How do we change that misconception? And that is going to play into how your content strategy works. Now, that might be as simple as writing 1 or 2 blog posts addressing the reality of what your service is versus the misconception. But it may not be that simple, because you may also be dealing with things like, for example, if there's a generation gap and you're a baby boomer driven company, or it's run by baby boomers, and you're trying to reach a millennial audience, you're now going to have a disconnect of trying to figure out how to reach that audience. So part of your strategy for producing the content might look like going and interviewing people in the audience and doing videos, kind of like what you're doing here, Drew, with these Hangouts, because it might just be not only that the audience needs to hear something, it might be a question of who. It goes back to, just to kind of recap this a little bit, just goes back to figuring out what change in thinking do you need to produce in order for people to become more likely to purchase your product or service based on what point of the buying cycle that they're in. So once you've identified the strategy and you've identified that piece, how you actually distill that down into topics, it really depends on a lot of different things. It depends on the specifics of the individual business. But I think really the key is to really focus on the audience. Really, focus on what it's like to be the buyer, and focus on that piece. The more you focus on the buyer, the easier it is to translate a strategy into topics. I think the hang-up for most businesses is they focus on themselves too much, and then it just becomes ambiguous, and it becomes, well, do we need to promote this on social media more? Do we need to just come up with some more creative ideas? Or they tend to spin their wheels and not understand why the audience isn't responding. So that I think that probably would be where I would kind of tie it together, is that if you're haven't started yet and you're just looking for the quickest way to get started, the first thing you can do is just get started. Just the worst thing you can do is produce content and it's the wrong content, but then you'll know it was the wrong content when people don't respond the way you think they will. So that's the thing about strategy, is that strategic thinking is definitely important, but I would caution anybody against allowing not having a strategy for being the reason to not get started, because you're never going to have the perfect strategy, and it may be better to just get moving first. I mean, it's easier to think about strategy when you're in motion and you've got some things moving forward, and then you can think about how do we do it better, versus being at a standstill saying, well, let's do some more thinking and then we can get started. I've seen more often than not that ends up leading to nothing happening at all, which is the worst possible strategy. So, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So one of the things that that I've found interesting, that I've learned over the last probably 5 years, has to do with something called the curse of knowledge, and I think that gets in the way of a lot of people who are trying to write, because they already figure that everybody already knows everything that there is about or not everything, but knows the basics of whatever it is that the business is doing, and that's really not true. Isn't that correct? Have you worked with that at all?
Oh yeah, that's every single business owner has that issue. I mean, the curse of knowledge. I mean, the way I think I originally heard that defined was, it's that the curse is that you forget what it was like not to know everything you know, and so what ends up happening is we develop these blind spots where stuff just becomes obvious to us, becomes second nature to us, and this is whether you're writing for business or for anything else. But we have a tendency to assume things, assume sophistication and knowledge on the part of the reader that can create a real problem because it disconnects us from the reader. You want to find great examples of this, just go read anything on a technical subject or read about IT. And if you've ever seen why they say engineers are terrible salespeople, they'll go into a sales meeting and start throwing acronyms all over the place, start talking about terminology that nobody understands. And just kind of but we're all guilty of that to some extent. But if that's where I think that going back to that avatar exercise for a second, focusing on the reader or the buyer's experience and focusing on what it feels like to be the buyer is one way to kind of interrupt that curse of knowledge and bring it back to the emotional side of things, because that's one place where it kind of ties together. So for example, I might say, if I'm a buyer looking for, let's say if I sell flat screen TVs, say, okay, if I'm a buyer looking for a flat screen TV, what emotions am I experiencing? And one might be, for example, just overwhelm, looking at 10,000 kinds of flat screen TVs and have no idea what kind I should buy, and I don't really feel like spending my time researching it. That's one potential persona you could be marketing to. And so if you just focus on that emotional element of it, versus wanting to talk about every bell and whistle and all the advanced features of a flat screen TV that your audience may or may not care about at all. Focus on what it's like to be them, and then that'll actually really help you to illuminate what is it you actually need to talk about and what is it you need to not talk about at all. So so yeah, curse of knowledge is definitely, in a sales context. I've also heard that a lot of times you'll have salespeople that will just basically just go into non-stop talking mode about all the great reasons why you should buy this product, and the curse of knowledge makes that worse, because the fact that you know everything about your product, it not only may confuse your prospect with irrelevant information, but you actually might raise new concerns, because you may have told them about something that they didn't know about, and they now have a new reason to be hesitant about buying your product or service that would have never come up if you weren't the one who brought it up. So it can be a problem, and so yeah, less is definitely more with content. Unfortunately, it's one of those things where I wish I could tell you the simple and short answer to it, but it's really just something you have to be aware of, that what you know is probably 100 times what your prospect knows, and they don't really want or need to know everything you know. They just want to know the minimal amount that they need to make a decision based on where they're at right now.
One of the curses that I've heard, another curse besides the curse of knowledge, and this is in a sales environment, is a lot of salespeople won't stop talking, and they'll talk the prospect into buying and then out of buying again, just as you were talking about, by bringing up too much other information. So I think that's a related corollary kind of thing.
Definitely.
Now, how does this apply to social media? Because I know that a lot of the writing you do is in the social media field, and I know we've been talking somewhat about social media, but can we get a little bit more focused on the impact of writing for your market in the social media area?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, social media is definitely a very powerful tool, and unfortunately, I see a lot of businesses doing things with social media that probably do them more harm than good, just as a result of not really understanding social media. And that actually happens a lot of times when you have business owners that don't use social media themselves, but they have been told by a lot of people that, well, you need to be on Facebook, you need to be on Twitter, you need to be on Google Plus, and they might, for example, hire their their nephew in college to come in and do some things on social media, or they might even engage a social media company. But in terms of the writing that you're doing for your business, whether that's blog posts or, and in fact, I kind of broaden the scope, because I'm really focused not only just on writing but content in general. So that might include photography, video, other forms of media that you would basically put in front of your audience in hopes of changing their thinking. Social media, the first thing that I think any business owner really needs to do is get yourself educated about how social media really works and why your particular audience uses social media. If you don't understand that well, and even if you do think you understand it well, you may not understand it as well as you think you do. Because the thing is, social media is not an advertising tool. It's not something to just put a billboard up saying 20% off my product, come buy today, or something like that. And I've seen a lot of that, but then I've also seen things on social media where people will just kind of start churning out really generic, bland, vanilla type content. Like, for example, if it's a dentist's office, they might say, 5 benefits of brushing your teeth or something like that. And it's against one of those tactics that people may, I don't know, I think is it better than doing nothing? Probably. But, rather than just, getting into doing these tactics on social media, you really have to look at your audience. And social media in a general sense, without saying anything about a specific audience, is a tool for people to stay connected with their friends. If you look at the reason why they're on there, now that's more of the social sites like Facebook and Twitter, maybe to a lesser extent, and Google Plus a little bit. But Twitter, you've also got is more of a news feed. So let's look at one platform at a time here and just kind of break this down a little bit. Facebook, mostly social. They're going there to upload, family pictures, vacation photos, pictures of their dog. You got people that are sharing quotes, and some people that just check in once a day to see what their friends are doing. And so when you kind of think about your audience for your product or service that you're trying to reach, now you got to think about specifically when they go on Facebook, what are they going on Facebook for? So if Facebook lends itself pretty well to social type of topics. BuzzFeed is one third-party service that I see a lot of stuff trending on Facebook, and they'll publish a lot of these lists. Like what was one I just saw recently? Like oh yeah, here's a good example. It was 13 of the names of fake movie titles on Seinfeld. I just saw this last week, and see that's the kind of stuff that. It's the kind of thing that people will share with their friends and comment about. It's shareable. It's buzzworthy. People will talk about it. So that type of content I found will work pretty well with Facebook. If you're going to be on Twitter, I will say, if you're going to really look at using Twitter as a sales engine and be ready to spend some time and spend some money getting to know Twitter, how it really works. It's a real-time news sharing platform. Personally, I don't pay a lot of attention to Twitter for my business right now. I may at some point in the future, but I just don't. I kind of decided that I wasn't ready to spend the time and the money on it, really using it properly. So I just use an automated social media tool. It's called Hootsuite that I'll push my blog posts out to Twitter. I don't expect to really have anything happen as a result of that. I just put it out there. Use Twitter as a platform. You got to think about what breaking news might you have access to that if you share it, people would be interested to read it. Or if you're not necessarily in a position to be breaking news directly, I've seen the other application for Twitter is to be talking about the news as it breaks. So you could be watching the news on TV and tweeting about it on Twitter, and that's a real easy way to get engagement with people and potentially meet new people. You might also be watching a football game and tweeting about it on Twitter. That's so it kind of overlaps with the use for Facebook somehow a little bit, but Twitter is much more real time, and the demographic is smaller of the people that are going to be on Twitter. The other thing I want to just mention about all these social platforms is hashtags. You want to start paying attention to hashtags and start understanding how those get used. And a hashtag is any word with that pound sign or hash symbol in front of it. And what those are used for is that they basically track conversations in real time as they happen. And there's a number of those. Like I'll actually just pull up Twitter right now and just see. Like you can look on Twitter on the left-hand side of the screen, and it'll give you a list of hashtags that are currently trending or conversations that are getting a lot of buzz or that people are talking about. And figures, I'm not signed in. But just give me 1 second here. I wanted to just give a couple examples of hashtags that are trending right now. I thought that would be kind of neat. And as luck would have it, I'm not seeing them come up. All right, well, that's a topic for another day anyhow. But hashtags are just something you want to just be familiar with. If you just go to Twitter and just see a few examples, what you can do is click on those hashtags and it'll pull up a list of recent tweets and it'll show you what people are following. But the thing about hashtags is that a lot of them don't really do anything. A lot of them just kind of fizzle out. But there are some that will actually go viral and become a conversation that people are following on a global level. And that happens around a lot of times with news events, particularly some international things that have happened over the past couple of years. There have been hashtags that started around those. Sometimes even charities or nonprofits will start hashtag campaigns around an awareness, something that they're trying to drive awareness of. So I would say those are a couple examples. And Google Plus also incorporates hashtags, although Google Plus is probably more, I would say, an information sharing platform. You're not going to see as many cat pictures or ski photos on Google Plus as you would on Facebook, and it's not necessarily going to be as real time as Twitter is. But my understanding of Google Plus is that it's much more about having relevant information up there, and Google really wants you to use the communities feature. Again, it has to be something you have to be willing to really put some serious time into educating yourself and understanding. So I really think for a business that wants to write on social media, the real key is to understand, again, it all goes back to understanding who your audience is, but understanding how your audience uses social media. There's other channels, there's Pinterest, there's Instagram, there's all these different things. And I would actually suggest to a business owner, instead of trying to be everywhere, you can certainly use automated tools to post on a lot of different sites, and there's really nothing to lose from doing that. But I think you really want to get to know one platform at a time. And the reality is your audience may not be on all these different social media channels. If you're trying to reach stay-at-home moms running their own businesses, I've heard that Pinterest is a pretty good media for that. That's who a lot of them are up at 10 o'clock at night on Pinterest. So just because that's particularly if they're taking care of kids, that's when the kids go to bed. So that's just one example of how you look at your demographic next to the particular social media channel. But for whatever business that you're in, you want to just probably figure out, based on who your audience is, what's one good channel that your audience is most likely to be on, and spend some time getting to know, observe how users use that channel. And that really counts double for, again, like I said in the beginning, any business owners that don't really use social media, you really need to get familiar with it and see how people use it if you're going to make it make sense for your business. I mean, it's something I've seen happen a lot of times, is that that situation where you're using Facebook to put up purely ads and solicitation, and that's usually a case where the business owner doesn't really understand Facebook, and so that's really the key there. And if you want to know how to really educate yourself on a social media channel, what you can do is just go on there and watch what people are doing. You don't have to post anything. You can just go and just observe what content people are putting and see what gets liked and what gets shared versus what doesn't. And that's probably the best place to start.
Okay, thanks. You were talking about blogs. I wanted to ask you a couple questions that I hear a lot of times, and that is, how frequently should you blog, and what should the length of a blog be? And I know that there's variations in that, but
Yeah.
are there some general rules? Oh, and I wanted to add a third thing too. How often in a blog post should you be offering a deal or really using it as an advertising mechanism?
Well, the answers to all those questions are it depends. You know, there's a lot of blogs come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. There really is not the one-size-fits-all approach to doing blogging. You really have to think about the purpose for your blog, and if you're doing a blog for a business, you have to think about how does that blog fit into your overall business plan? How does that blog fit into your sales process? How do people find out about your blog? How are you going to be promoting the blog? All those kinds of things. I mean, one common way that I see businesses use blogs that can be fairly effective is just as a kind of a company news kind of a bulletin board where you'll say, okay, here's what's happening in my company this month, and have even just a once a month post, and it might be about the fact that you're having a holiday party and with directions to the party or something like that, or a client appreciation lunch, or you could put up a blog post about the new employee that was just hired last week. You could do, and answer your question, Drew, about deals just real quickly. I think my rule of thumb for any content strategy is it should be about no more than 20 to 30% promotional of all the content that you're producing on any given channel. So I think there's nothing wrong with having a call to action at the bottom of each blog post saying, you know, for example, if I got a tire repair shop saying, hey, if you want to find out some good deals on tires, you know, come visit us at the shop or something like that, as long as the rest of the post was about something else. In terms of frequency and length, I've seen blog posts that were 3 sentences in length. Actually, I've seen, now I think about it, if you look at Seth Godin's blog, I mean, I've seen 5-word blog posts of his, and I've seen ones that were a page and a half long. So, that goes back to the mentality of your audience, and your audience is going to be probably diverse, but you have to be aware that there are some readers that have a tendency to skim, and some that just want to get information in quick little nuggets and don't want to have to spend a lot of time sifting through stuff. So those readers are going to want to read the shorter posts, and there are some people that still like to digest long information. So you kind of have to have a little bit of a mix of both. But the other thing you might want to consider is having a short teaser with a click here to read more. I know you can configure WordPress to do that easily, where you have on your front page your last 6 blog posts, and basically you could write your content with those different mindsets of people in mind, and you could have, set it up so that the first paragraph is, enough information that the skimmer will get what they want, or if you want the skimmer to dive in and read the bigger post, just design it to be a teaser where you get them interested to read more. Depending on the function of it. In terms of frequency, I've heard before that some people will say, well, you got to update your blog at least once a week. I don't think that's necessarily true. In fact, I don't update my blog every week. I try to get something on there at least once a month personally, but you got to think about the role and the function of your blog. And a blog can just as easily function as a repository for information. Like if you write articles in your business, suppose, like, for example, if you're a tax accounting firm and you want to write about, tax advantages that you can only take advantage of before the first of the year, and let's less relevant during the month of December. That's a great article you can just put up on a blog and leave it there. And then you could actually reshare that multiple times, and then next year when December comes around again, you can share it again. So So if you're using a blog as a repository, like that kind of thing, you don't necessarily need to update it on any regular basis at all. The importance then would be to accurately categorize and tag the blog posts, and maybe have a theme or a layout designed in a visual way to make it easy to navigate and find articles on different topics. Keep in mind also that with WordPress and I believe Blogger and other platforms, you don't have to show the date of last publication. You can turn that off. So if you haven't updated your blog in a while, you can set it up so that it's not obvious that it's been sitting there. For a first-time viewer, they won't necessarily know that at all. That said, I mean, if you're trying to reach an audience and trying to basically stay top of mind with your audience, and that's your reason for doing a blog, then you obviously will want to update it more regularly. And if you want to make sure that you have your RSS capability turned on, it stands for really simple syndication. There's a lot of people that follow blogs using an RSS reader. It's a software tool. Even if you don't know what that is, there's people who use it, and all you need to know is to just make sure that that feature is enabled on your blog, and it's usually as simple as turning on a checkbox. But the other last point I'll make about this is that if you send out a newsletter once a month or once every 2 weeks or however often that is, you want to think about having fresh content for your newsletter, and you can do that with new articles that you write, and those can be based on the current season. But again, if you have one of those repositories of content, you can send out old content from last year or from 3 years ago using a newsletter. And that's, there's MailChimp as a free tool you can use to do that and get your content a little bit more life, just by reaching more of an audience. And you can have, I believe they will give you up to 2,000 users you can send out emails to, and up to 10,000 email messages per month before you have to start paying for it. So those are just a couple of tools. There's a lot of different tools out there, but in terms of going back to your original question about frequency and length, it really comes back to the mindset of the audience. You probably need a combination of both, long and short posts for length, and frequency. It just depends on the role and the function of the blog.
Great. Well, thanks. Well, tell us a little bit about what you do, Dave. I know you mentioned what you did in terms of being a writer, your history as a writer, but what kind of services do you offer people these days, and how can they contact you?
Okay, well, that's a great question, Brew, and thanks for bringing that up. My website is probably the easiest way to contact me. It's dave-baldwin.com, and there's my cell phone is 919-723-7916, and email is dave@dave-baldwin.com. But my services are content writing. I mean, I'm doing a lot right now with producing blog posts and email newsletter campaigns for people. I also do a little bit of social media content. I'm not a social media manager. That's not. I don't really go in and say I'll set up all your Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff. But there are some pretty simple automated tools that if business wants to regularly be pushing content out on social media, that's something I can manage for people. And if a business wants to write a blog and says, okay, I don't know how to write and I don't have time to do it, I can do everything from, we can research the topics, and and we can do all the writing for a business, and we can do all the publishing and all that stuff. I've currently got a couple of different writers working for me, and I've kind of shifted my focus away from doing the writing myself versus hiring and training writers. And I only mention that now because one of the other things I can do for a business is if they have a writer that they've hired on staff, I can come in and spend a half a day and do a couple of training sessions with their writer and help them to understand some best practices for writing marketing content that's effective and that engages the audience in a way that's going to get a good response. So yeah, really those are the two main aspects of my business: is production of content and training.
Great, thanks. Well, I think we've covered the topic pretty well, and my name is Drew Becker. We just finished talking with Dave Baldwin, and you can contact me if you want to get a hold of me to talk about, because I do work on writing, and I also have this package, Easy Writer Pro, that helps you to create ebooks, and you can reach me via drewbecker@conveymediagroup.com. But thank you, Dave. It's great to talk to you, and we appreciate all the information.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on your show, Drew. Always a pleasure.
Great. We appreciate it, and we'll see everybody at the next show, which will either be later this month or early in the next month. Thanks.